Welcome to the Karma School of Business, a podcast about the private equity industry, business best practices, and real-time trends. I'm Sean Mooney, Blueway's founder and CEO. In this episode, we have an awesome conversation with Dave Shepard, Director of Portfolio Operations with Rainier Partners. Enjoy. So I am super excited to be here with Dave Shepard today. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, super excited on my end too. I feel like I've worked with the Blue Wave team in other capacities and excited to get to experience this with you. I know it's a lot of awesome speakers have come on, a lot of great topics. And so hoping I can do some justice to the lineage that you've had up to this point.
Oh, thank you. And we are really lucky to have you on because our listeners are going to hear Dave's got a very interesting background, but B has seen a lot of things that are going to help inform certainly business builders like me that find these things not only interesting, but also actionable. And so maybe as we jump in, Dave, what I'd love to do is start off with more of the story of you. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of where you grew up, how you kind of came up, maybe college, first job out of college, and then ultimately how you got into the world of private equity?
It's a good question, and I will try to answer it as succinctly as possible, and maybe let that be a jumping point for any particularly interesting parts of it. Grew up youngest of six, single mom, poor household, and so I think that started a lot of the themes that we'll talk about throughout the day of jack of all trades, master of none. And so grew up doing a lot of things in high school, played sports, was in the band, which a lot of people don't realize that they know me now, really into academics. So I think that balanced kind of generalist lifestyle really attracted me and probably attracted, honestly, West Point to me. And so I ended up going into the military, not because I had any military roots whatsoever or didn't have any patriotic ambitions at the time. It was more of great education, free education. And so ended up going there, phenomenal experience, felt in some ways a little more like a job than a college experience at times, but really, really transformational or foundational for me. And I spent 8 years in the Army after that as a combat arms officer, to include a deployment to Iraq. And so had a really awesome experience just leading people. The Army is one of the first or only institutions where you graduate from college and they just immediately put you in charge of people, right, wrong, or indifferent. So it was really, really great experiences there. I really honed a lot of just kind of the operational people side of how I view the world. Still didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. Honestly, still don't. But at the time, felt like business school was a good way to figure that out. So I ended up going to Harvard Business School and then thought consulting would be a great way to get exposure and, again, just figure out what I wanted to be. So I went to Bain for 7 years, started in Atlanta, ended up in Seattle. And out of the blue, John and Alex here at Rainier reached out and said, hey, we're looking to build a portfolio operations group within Rainier Partners, private equity firm here in Seattle. And I thought it was an awesome opportunity to kind of meld the operational side of what I did in the Army to the strategic side of what I did at Bain. And for the most part, was super impressed with their vision and the team that they had put together. And so it was a really compelling opportunity. I jumped at that about 3 years ago and have since been here at Rainier for the last 3 years, leading portfolio operations in all things value creation, all things talent, all things data systems and reporting. And so a lot of what we do to help lower middle market businesses has been almost a good culminating moment of all of those random disparate moments that have brought me here today.
It's a fascinating background. I'd love to maybe kind of double tap into West Point because it's one of the themes that I at least see from our perch here is that there's a fair amount of people in private equity who went through one of the military academies, including West Point. What do you think is the driver there? What is it, that kind of secret sauce on West Point?
If I think back there, I think there are a handful of hallmarks. I think one, at least in terms of West Point, one of the more interesting ways that we learn there is through the Thayer method. The Thayer method is essentially like, just go figure it out first. And then after you've tried and struggled and often failed to figure out, then let's come together in a classroom and have somebody teach it to you. And so that muscle of seeing something new for the first time and not having structure to be able to solve it. It's like they don't teach you how to solve it and then you solve it. You try to figure it out first and then someone teaches you. It's a really powerful method that I think has broad reaching applications, not only in business, but in private equity, where a lot of times like you're trying to figure out really complex problems. And so I think that is a really, really valuable skill you learn there that translates to both private equity and just strategy in particular. So I think that's one. The other part of it is it's a relatively defined path to be a junior military officer, go to business school, go from business school into whether it's consulting or finance. And so I think that kind of defined path for people like me that wouldn't have known how to get into finance otherwise is really, really both helpful, valuable, but then also leads folks with similar backgrounds to me into this kind of space. So I think the combination of those two factors is training and or education that's well suited for this type of work, as well as a somewhat defined path for folks like myself comes together, then leads to ex-military folks with a strategic background applying that in the world of portfolio operations or finance.
That's probably one of the better answers I've ever heard on that, actually. I've always wondered, and I know it's like the leadership, it's the problem solving, but that whole right from the day one, the Thayer method, where you're saying, figure it out, and then we'll bring in resources to help it. That's the welcome to every day I had in PE when I was in PE. It's just like, there's not a lot of like help at the beginning. There's like, go figure it out. And the answer is failure is not the option. Keep on going until it's done.
Yeah, and that's probably one I didn't think of. That's probably a third one. What I tell people is something I learned way back when in both West Point and Ranger School is sometimes it's about just putting on a really heavy rucksack and just like putting one step in front of the other. Or it's like, I generally know the direction I need to go and I don't know exactly how to get there, but I'm just going to move in that direction and make steady progress. And oftentimes, executing on strategy is not some silver bullet or aha moment. It's just like chopping wood. It's like you just got to keep chopping, and then one day a tree falls, and you're like, okay, I can't believe how much work I've been able to do. And so I think a lot of that you learn from West Point of like, you just got to show up, and you got to chop wood, and like that's a big part of being successful.
I appreciate that, is because if brilliance and strategy was the name of the game, I would have been in a lot of trouble. It's the 10% strategy, but the 90% of tenacity, grit, and resilience. That is the only way I ever made it out of whatever intro roles I've ever had.
Same. I tell people all the time, I've got a very small brain, so I have to overcompensate by working hard.
And no offense to those who are really good at it, but it's the execution part that's in some ways the secret sauce. Maybe the next question I'll ask you here, Dave, is one of the things I like to ask is what's one of the things we'd know you better if we knew this about you? What might one of those things be?
I would say you would know me better if you know that like learning is incredibly important, just like getting better. And so I don't know if it's a part of growing up in a relatively modest or poor house, like just the idea of improving your station in life and doing that through education and through personal development has been a really core part of who I am and what brought me here. And it's one that I don't want to or don't need to rely on resources to get better. Like I can just put in the work and get better as a person and individual. And that's probably led me to where I am today in terms of the success or ability to do the job. But then also, there's just a lot of other random things that sometimes apply to what I do at Rainier or within the portfolio, sometimes don't. Of things like been really interested in learning and developing a perspective on AI and really like hands-on keyboard doing some coding there. For a long time, I was really, really interested in understanding the world of competition and competed pretty competitively in CrossFit. So there's just like these random things that I've picked up over time because I generally always, since growing up, have had this like get better day to day type of mindset, even if it's not directly applicable to what we do.
And so when you're interested about something new, how do you start? What's your approach? And you're just starting off on something.
Maybe with the way I think about it, I try to almost set up a challenge of some sort, or at least like something to really sink my teeth into. Like I do like and I do find value in reading about things or watching videos or tutorials about things, but I learn best by actually doing it. And so a really good example is, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, at the very onset of AI machine learning, I was like, I think machine learning is interesting and applicable to so many things that we do. I'm going to try to set up a machine learning model. And I probably fumbled through that for a good 6 to 12 months. But by fumbling through the process of setting one up myself, I was forced to teach myself a lot of really foundational skills around just data engineering and architecting the right solution and getting it into production. And what are the different models from a machine learning? How do you code them? How do you tweak them? How do you use them? And so what started out as this seems interesting, let me just go figure it out, has led to a 2 to 3 year journey where I'm still not great, but I'm decent. I'm still a jack of all trade, master of none theme of definitely not the best person out there, but I know enough to be dangerous, which is really, really helpful in my role for a lot of things.
I totally appreciate where you're coming from. It's just the curiosity about something and then figure it out and then do it. And for a small subset of the population, that is the most fun thing you could ever do. Like, I think I've told the story on our show here before, but it was last December. My son plays Quiz Bowl, which is kind of like competitive team Jeopardy. And I was like, you never know what the score was. And so I was like, I was wondering if I could just make a Quiz Bowl app. And so I went to one of these tools, one's called VO, where it's these AI apps that can help just auto write code for you. And so in the course of an afternoon, it made me exactly what I wanted. The hard part was getting it into the app store because I was like, how do I get it on my phone? Well, I got to put it in the app store. It was the most fun thing. And my wife's like, what are you doing back there? It's like, code. Now, I think by all measures of anyone who knows what they're doing, it's probably pretty janky. But, but to me, I was like, oh, this is the best Sunday ever.
Yeah, 100% resonates. And I've even had those moments with my wife, Julie, who's like, what the heck are you working on right now? I think over time, as she's gotten to know me more, she realizes that there are just times where I get interested in something that I will spend time on it. And just as you said, it leads to a lot of just really great learnings. Some of those you can apply to other aspects of life. Some of them, there's not a lot of use cases for that. But generally, I found that a really valuable piece of me that's kind of carried me through that. If you knew that about me, you definitely know more about how I work.
And I love that. And that's a good insight. And it makes a lot of sense, particularly in terms of where we're going in the conversation here. Hey, as a quick interlude, this is Sean here. Wanted to address one quick question that we regularly get. We often get people who show up at our website, call our account executives, and say, hey, I'm not private equity. Can I still use Blue Wave to get connected with resources? And the short answer is yes. Even though we're mostly and largely used by hundreds of private equity firms, thousands of their portfolio company leaders, every day we get calls from everyday top proactive business leaders at public companies, independent companies, family companies. So absolutely, you can use this as well. If you want to use the exact same resources that are trusted and being deployed and perfectly calibrated for your business needs, give us a call. Visit our website at bluewave.net. Thanks. Back to the episode. So maybe as we turn the page here, Dave, one of the things that I think is really extremely resident in PE, and it's something we've already kind of talked about, is this idea of encountering a challenge, rising up to it, overcoming it, and having a way of just kind of doing that over and over again. With that in mind, and this is kind of tenacity, resilience, grit that we've been talking about, what are maybe one or some of the harder things that you've encountered in business or life, and kind of how do you take those types of things on?
I would say that a central theme in challenges in business and life is just the challenges that naturally come up around people, talent, and honestly, just like leading. And when I say leading, the thought that comes to mind, especially from a challenging point, is not leading when you have direct authority, but it's around just like leading in kind of a 360-degree way where sometimes you have to lead up and sometimes you have to lead across peers. And so a lot of times it's me partnering with CEOs and the executive teams to try to implement change, which is often hard. And so you really have to rely on some of those servant leadership type of skills that helped me overcome that back in the day, that still helps me overcome some of those challenges today.
I think you once again kind of hit the nail right on the head, particularly as you think about PE operations. And one of the things that I've spoken with friends and clients who are newer to those roles, and the initial challenges particularly people have is they'll say, I have all of the expectation internally to get things done, but none of the mandate at the portco level. To your point, and so the way that you kind of encapsulated that from maybe your experience in the military, you can see how it translates very well because within your role in leading the portfolio operations, I'm sure your colleagues are like, we got to get things moving faster. Well, welcome to business. But also, you're working with the executives who really have the hands on the wheel. Do you have like an approach or a method or any kind of life hacks that you found kind of make that work?
I talked about the Thayer method earlier. There's also a Socratic method, quite popular at HBS. And I find that to be one of the most powerful tools, especially if you can pair it with being well prepared. Like, generally, in my experience, the Socratic method, which is effectively like asking questions to help drive alignment and understanding, works really well if you know generally where the answer is headed. And you can help people feel like it's their answer rather than your answer. You're not telling them what to do, they're arriving on it by themselves. And one of two things typically happens in that process. One is you drive kind of a common understanding of not only the challenge, the answer, path forward, but you generate that buy-in and alignment along the way. Or two, and this happens quite often from time to time, is I learned something and it changes my perspective in a way where now I understand why or understand the reason why they are reluctant to enact or implement or move faster. And it helps inform our perspective on the Rainier side to say, yes, we went into it with this perspective. Now, knowing what I know now, learned through the Socratic method of just asking the right questions, it informs our perspective to say, hey, we should think about this a little differently. So I think that is one tool, very tactical tool that's been quite valuable in kind of this informal leadership capacity to drive alignment.
I really like that. So I used to work in my prior life with a number of kind of HBS folks, and now I appreciate what they were actually doing to me. And so the Socratic method, no, I knew we would regularly, it was such a tool. And I came on it from the deal side, but they would just drill Socratic method into me so much. And it was incredibly powerful because ultimately we're trying to seek truth, improve common understanding, and get to a better outcome. And leading with questions is a heck of a lot more effective than saying without understanding, particularly when you're seeing so many new things all the time.
The one piece I would pair with it or would give as advice is you got to do it authentically. I think people can very clearly see through if you're trying for that gotcha moment where you're just asking a question because you already know. And so, like, authentically seeking to understand and building that trust with the people you're working with is absolutely critical because otherwise it won't have the intended effect and they won't trust that you're legitimately looking out for their best interest and trying to understand their perspectives. And so that's where there can be a kind of a common failing of using questions to try to guide the direction can go awry if you're not doing it authentically.
I think that is 1,000% spot on point there. Our conversation, I think, is getting quite broad in terms of applications, not only for business, but this stuff's for life in terms of the ways you can use these things to get a better we outcome out of these things versus kind of a me thing. Hi, Karma School of Business listeners. Sean here. Wanted to shine another quick spotlight on one of the most important ways PE firms preserve and create value. The private equity industry is one of the most regular users of interim executives. Why? Because these select private equity grade executives can be hugely impactful for saving company value during critical times, accelerating strategic initiatives, and bridging executive transitions that happen to almost any company over time. To this day, many don't know that Blue Wave has turned the interim exec offering on its head and completely made it the way that my friends and I in PE always wished it was. Blue Wave has a dedicated team that does nothing but interview, pre-vet, credentialize, and reference private equity grade groups and people so that we know who you need before you call us. In the case of interims, we have more than 1,000 top interim private equity grade CEOs and CFOs that are ready to be matched for your exact need when you need it. Give us a call or visit our website at bluewave.net and we can give you excellence in alpha with ease. Back to the show. So maybe next thing I'd love to get your thoughts on here, Dave, is kind of your approach at Rainier. And with kind of the things that we're talking thus far, I think it'll set this up kind of nicely. How does your firm approach value creation? What resources are you bringing all to support portfolio companies that you partner with?
Maybe to answer the question, maybe I'll start with a little bit of this is a similar way to think about it, or at least the way I think about it with our businesses, is starting with our strategy. How have we as a firm, and John and Alex in starting the firm, decided that we want to be differentially better and or different from others? Like what do we do that is different and special? Like what is our unique special sauce? And so for us, it starts with like the strategy is dictated by what we focus on. And for us, it is lower middle market businesses, often founder led businesses, by and large services oriented businesses in a handful of key strategic end markets, whether it's business services or consumer services or industrial services or financial services. And so what that means is we're often working with a founder of a business that we've just invested in that hasn't gone through the process of institutional funding or hasn't gone through the process of building out a professional team. And to make an investment successful, we're asking that person to partner with us to double the size of the business in 5 years or less, or something to that effect. And so, having gone through that exercise time and time again, what we really started to do is refine how we approached and really make it more defined and repeatable so that whenever we invest, we say, here's how we work, here's the expectation. And what we've come up with at Rainier Partners is Summit is our approach to value creation, which encapsulates kind of that end-to-end process we like to do with partners that we invest in. So the way that I think about it is it's all of the steps that you take in an individual partnership from a value creation perspective. You set the team, you get upgrade visibility and reporting and really understand the business and performance in a real way, map the strategy. And so thinking about what's our end state, what do we want to be in 5 years, and then working that way back to say what are the operational initiatives, and then maximizing quick wins early in investment is like really, really crucial to getting the flywheel spinning. And then really starting to go through and instituting the operational rigor, managing KPIs, getting those in place. And then finally, just teaming up, doing it collaboratively and letting folks know that we are a partner in the trenches with you. My leadership style has always been to be on the front lines in the trenches and not on a hill directing traffic. And so I try to encourage us as a team to do that with the founders and the partners that we invest in to say, hey, we're going to do this together. And it's been a pretty powerful recipe and a pretty powerful blueprint for which we try to partner with our businesses to create value. We've got a lot of infrastructure and process set up around enabling and supporting that process.
I really like what you articulated there. There's a lot of, I think, some great recurring themes in our conversation. One, it's kind of integrating the concept of and, not or, the strategy and execution working hand in hand. And I like it how there's just some common core principles of business buildings in there in terms of you got to get the team, you got to be able to measure what matters while you're along the way. You got to bring your strategy down to execution, like get the quick wins, like one step at a time type stuff. And then can you get that flywheel winning faster and more efficiently? And then do you have the right people on the bus? This is like Jim Collins is probably smiling when he listens to the and this whole idea that also that I appreciate is there's a we, not a me, or this kind of chain of command per se. It's like, no, Porco's, we're in it with you together. We're going to win together or not. And so let's kind of march together towards the top of that hill.
Yeah, 100%. I think you said it way better and more articulately than I could have. And at the end of the day, the way that I view the world is if our portfolio companies are successful, like we as a firm will be successful, period. And so all of my energy goes towards making them successful. And so it's less about how do I, Dave Shepard, be successful and like climb the mountain. It's more of what can I do to make these businesses successful? Because at the end of the day, that's going to be what drives investments, returns, and good outcomes as individuals on the team and the businesses see a lot of success.
So you're kicking off a new relationship with a portfolio company. To what degree do they know this is the process that will be coming their way?
We typically tee it up in diligence. And so I will go out and on site and meet the management team and say, hey, here's our summit process. Here's what it entails. Here are the steps of the process and when you'll see more of me and less of me. And what we found is, especially in diligence, management teams are really excited about that. A lot of times they are seeking investment to grow. And more often than not, the founders that we invest in stay in the business. And so they're really excited about that aspect of it. And then we do a little bit, especially on setting the team up front. We have developed a play, or at least developed a relationship with partners that we do the assessment, the leadership diagnostic of a team before we even do the investment to say, hey, setting the team is so critical and you want to do that as quickly as possible. Let's do some of that work in diligence and starting the summit process. And so the short answer is we set the expectation and really just give them the roadmap, even in diligence. And more often than not, they're quite excited to get that started. They actually want to get through the diligence and say, I can't wait to get past this phase so that we can turn our attention to the more fun, interesting things about growing the business.
I, once again, very much appreciate your approach there. And at the risk of discussing a concept that came out of McKinsey to a Bain person, it reminds me of like the pyramid principle. It's like start with the punchline up front. Here's the answer. And then you kind of build into how you're going to do it. And they already know this is the method that you're going to do together. And they can probably see how your questions are in support of SUMMIT, right? And so you take the mystery out of it. You know what the ending is and how you're going to go there before you even start walking along the path together.
I think that's well said. And it gives us just that framework to, one, drive the work and making sure we're doing all the things that we think we need to do to be successful. But it helps give them the roadmap to say, hey, there are foundational components of working with Rainier partners that they're going to help us set into place so that we have the foundation to double the business.
And as you think about this kind of approach, how much are they involved in the orchestration of this with you all, and how kind of like symbiotic is the interactions?
The way I would describe the interactions is, in some ways, I'm a little more of the orchestrator or facilitator. And again, using a lot of the things that we've talked about earlier is like using the Thayer method to kind of understand the business and understand what the answer could be before we get there. But then also using Socratic method to ask the right questions and really bring out the expertise and experience that sits around the room. Because oftentimes these management teams have decades of experience in something that we at the Rainier side might have months of experience or years of experience if we've seen deals in this previously. And so oftentimes 90% of the answer comes from management and or from the advisors that we at Rainier bring to the table. And a lot of times the magic that I provide is structuring it in a way to drive clear understanding, articulation, and focus. So it's more of a process and orchestration that happens on our side versus all of the people playing the beautiful music are at the management table.
I love that. And maybe, Dave, as we kind of move to the next chapter of our conversation, and with advice in mind, what are some of the top pieces of advice that you and your colleagues are offering to your portfolio companies today to kind of manage not only the now, but what's to come?
Yeah, I would say maybe two things. We've already talked about it a little bit, so I won't spend a ton of time. Is one, making sure that your tactics, the things you do day to day, is tied to your strategy. And so the analogy I often give, just to bring it to life as we're going through the summit process where we're defining the strategy and developing some of those tactics, is think about the World War II analogy as the strategy was to defeat Germany by opening up the second front. The operation was D-Day, Normandy invasions, to kind of create that second front. But the tactics was literally driving the boat to the beach and getting off the beach in a way that could establish the beachhead. And so similarly, the advice I give to all of our businesses is let's define the strategy and then pull the thread to identify the operational initiatives that get us there. And then let's go a step further to say, what are we doing on a day in, day out basis? What are the tactics that we're doing to deliver that? So that's the one piece of advice that I continue to drive home with a lot of our leaders to say, let's make sure that everything we do is connected to that end state. So that's one. And then two, and kind of I previewed it a little earlier, I am really interested in the impact that AI will have, not only our businesses, but in business in general. And so I continue to give advice to our leaders to say, if we want to capitalize on this growing trend, a lot of it will depend on the underlying data and systems that we have in place today. Generally speaking, especially today, the agentic AI, it's useless without the foundational data component of it. Because at the end of the day, it's just a large language model that's augmented by proprietary data and systems. And so you got to really get that into place and understand the areas of your business that you can leverage it, or else others that you compete with will. So if you want to stay competitive and leverage what I believe will be really foundational transformational tools, a lot of it will rest on your ability to leverage the unique and proprietary data and systems that you have today. So that's the other piece, just even tactically or technically, that I give them advice is you got to be thinking about that today in order to leverage the skills, tools, technology tomorrow.
I love both of those. And one, for our listeners, Dave summed up probably a huge portion of HBS into a very elegant, like, here's what strategy is. You're so right. It's like your strategy, start with where you want to get to, and then apply tactics to get you to that spot, and then work your way back, and then chunk it into what you're going to do next year, and the year before, and then, like, what are you going to do today? And then voila, right? Measure along the way, and probably lots of lefts and rights and hitting the brakes.
Course correct as you go. That's right.
Yeah. So save your money, people. Listen to Dave. The other thing I think that was really insightful was your perspective on AI. In some ways, people ask what our business is, and I'll say we're a data business. And it's because it's the data that enables everything else that we do. And really, almost on a daily basis, we're getting calls from people like, how do I do neural networks? And we're like, whoa, let's get your data clean. Let's get it into Snowflake. Let's visualize it and then analyze it. And then you're going to know where to put the tools because your strategy is going to be so much better informed. And then don't view AI as a strategy. It's a tool. It's a tactic in service.
You said it really, really well. And it's part of how I've tried to define it at Rainier and with our partners is there's kind of that foundational data architecture that you have to build first. And then to demystify AI a little bit, like AI is kind of it's where we want to be. It's like artificial intelligence. But within AI, in order to achieve that, there are specific tools. Like there are machine learning models, various machine learning models. There's large language models. There's the augmented retrieval generation or RAG. So all of these are tools within the umbrella of artificial intelligence, but those are only good tools if they're built on solid foundation of data in the right context, in the right situation, help you make decisions.
What you pointed out there as well is this whole idea of everyone says, oh, the robots are taking over. It's like, well, the robots aren't replacing us, but someone who uses it well probably will. And then if you think about what are the real differentiators, it's everyone's going to have AI, which has access to almost the sum total of human knowledge. And the winners going forward are going to be those who have access to these large language models, these kind of machine learning models, the availability of data that everyone else has in the world, and then one data set that no one has. Ergo, those are the winners. So, to your point, I think you making that point so foundationally is once again very prescient kind of lens into what business builders need to do if they're going to be on the top of the mountain when these days and months and years go by really quickly.
And it kind of goes back to maybe even where we started earlier in the conversation is don't be afraid to, as business leaders, to spend some time really opening up the hood, really getting in there and understanding the pieces, because I probably wouldn't have as good of a grasp on, and I think you articulated it best, that AI is a tool. There are tools within there and an understanding of like, what are the inputs into it? Like, what is the fuel that makes it go without having spent some time really just like tinkering, understanding how it works and trying to build one and trying to figure out why it's not working. So those have all been really foundational in the understanding now as it's become more and more applicable to business to say, okay, now for each of our portfolio companies, where could we potentially use this? And how do we actually do that in production?
So many times we'll be working with a company where it's just they're completely new to it and they're just daunted. And it's just almost like, how do you even start? Because the end state seems so far away and they're already behind. How do you counsel your executives that you partner with your companies to kind of just get started?
I would say it's still a challenge we're grappling with. The way that I've seen it be most successful is to identify very clear, specific use cases within a business. An example, we have an administration business where a big part of what they do is when they win a big client and they administer kind of the health and benefits and welfare of that, there's a significant amount of effort to translate kind of the logic of a health plan into the systems that the organization uses to kind of run the administration. There's a lot of manual work that goes into that, like very large PDF documents that have to be translated into rules or logic that then have to be coded into pretty antiquated language. And this is a use case that you described earlier well is large language models as a capability do that really well. But they can only do that in this specific case if you augment it with underlying data that's not publicly available on these given customers or these given funds. And so that is a very specific use case as I talked to the CEO of that business to say, let's demystify AI a bit. Let's just talk about this one really critical part of the business that is a pain point for us as we continue to grow. Here is a potential tool that we can apply to it to make a difference. And I find that to be the most impactful way to talk about it is less in terms of let's automate your business with AI, but it's more of there is this very specific thing that we do in the organization where a tool within the AI umbrella can make an impact.
Once again, I think it's so spot on. And it made me, for whatever reason, I was thinking about when then machine learning it was coming out, and we would look, I used to invest in information data and analytics companies. And we would go and we'd meet these early kind of pioneers, and they would say, well, what are you going to do with this machine learning application that you're developing? And they would say, we're going to cure cancer. You're like, what do you mean you're going to cure cancer? Like all of it? Like all of it. You're like, you know what you should do is how about you just cure patient satisfaction? There's billions of dollars to it and it's easy. Like, so it's just like, to your point, it's just like start one place where there's a clear application, get a win, and that's going to take them on the journey and get the flywheel and the confidence and everything spinning.
I totally agree. I love the way that you think about that. And the other piece too is there's just so many unsexy steps with getting something like that into production. When I say production is like the ability to use it over and over again, and it's ingrained in the way you work as a business. That alone is a capability that you have to build within an organization to say, okay, we have all of these systems, we have all of this data. How do we move that along into systems that it's clean, readily usable, can train a model based on it, but then also as the data comes in that you actually want to make predictions or whatever you would want to use it for, that happens over and over again without the lift of creating it from scratch. So that capability, that muscle is one that you have to build, and it's best built by doing it, but doing it in a very specific, defined use case.
Yeah, I think that's once again like double tap that. So very good. With all this in mind, it's a good segue to the last part of our conversation here, where I'm always looking for gems of advice as a way that I kind of Frankenstein myself into being a semi like effective human being. And so, and it's life's a journey, not a destination, right? But if you could go back, Dave, to your 22-year-old self and give yourself a piece of advice that you wish you knew then, what might one of those pieces of advice be?
I would say maybe the one piece of advice that that person would be open to is for sure is lean into learning. And it doesn't have to be learning specific to the job that you're doing today, because oftentimes, especially in the world of business, the most valuable things you learn or the most valuable things you can apply, or even the way to be differentially better than others is to apply lessons from other aspects of life and business. And you can only really do that effectively if you're open to and you lean into opportunities throughout life to just get better and learn and improve. And so I would say my advice is always seek out opportunities, be intellectually curious, and carve out that time and give yourself the time to tinker and get underneath the hood and figure things out and challenge yourself to build the Quizbowl app or whatever it is. Like those things are critically important and valuable as investment in yourself to help you be successful. And so I would really encourage my 22-year-old self to spend time doing that. Don't shy away from learning things that don't have anything to do with the Army.
It's so great advice, right? Because it's just particularly when you're younger, and let's say when I was younger, I was just like running as fast as I could with blinders on each side. And you're just going from waypoint to waypoint and it's flowing by. And a lot of times I was just like running into tunnels and I didn't know if there was a light or a train at the other end. And then like get knocked on my back and then you can pick them up. But so much along the time, it's selfishly good for you too. Just take the time to learn about the world and where it's going and why it's going. And then it becomes so much more fascinating And maybe now I'm able to do a little more because my kids are kind of getting older. But I wish I had taken that time earlier when I didn't have time to make it happen, so I could be more kind of structurally curious.
Yeah, I have the same thoughts about my 22-year-old self.
So, Dave, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm really grateful and appreciative that you took the time, and I know that I'm better for it. And so, thank you for teaching me all sorts of things I wish I knew then as well. And I look forward to talking again soon on similarly curious, bizarre things that we're both up to next.
Yeah, we love that. And similarly, from my end, it's been really enriching and love to talk about things like this with like-minded folks who have really, really awesome experiences like you have. Because I learned as much or more than you might have learned from me.
That's all we have for today. Special thanks for joining. If you'd like to learn more about Dave Shepard and Rainier Partners, please see the episode notes for links. Please continue to look for the Karma School of Business podcast anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. We truly appreciate your support. If you like what you hear, please follow, 5-star rate, review, and share. This is a free way to support the show, and it really helps us when you do this, so thank you in advance. In the meantime, if you want to be connected with the world's best-in-class private equity-grade professional service providers, independent consultants, interim executives that are trusted and deployed by the best business builders in the world, including many hundreds of top PE firms and thousands of portfolio companies, and you can do the same whether or not you're in the PE world, give us a call or visit our website at bluewave.net. That's BLUWAVE, and we'll support your success. Onward. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals presenting and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any other persons or entities, including those referenced herein. No representations, warranties, financial, legal, tax, or other advice are made herein. Consult your advisors regarding any topics discussed during this episode.